Assalamu alaikum. So, students, I hope all of you are doing okay. Uh, Today, we're going to discuss the skeletal system. Basically, we're going to have a brief overview of the skeletal system. But first, I would like to discuss the questions that I gave you. That is the assignment that I gave you that you had to submit by 22nd or by Monday. So, I've seen the replies of many students, the assignments submitted by many students, and I'm impressed by it. But the only problem that I had with it was the third question, the difference between the diabetes mellitus and the diabetes insipidus. Many of you completely ignored this question. And regarding the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus, you didn't need to explain everything out in detail. I just needed a simple table in which you could draw. So when I ask you these kind of questions, these are the exam oriented questions that could be asked in the exams. So if you need to write the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, no need to go into details or write 3 or 4 paragraphs about each situation. You just need to draw a simple table and tabulate the differences as it would be in your exam. I would not expect you to fill 2 or 3 sheets for an SCQ. I would just expect you to give hard pointers or to the point answers to the questions. So, about the history of diabetes mellitus, what is diabetes mellitus? The things that I expected you to write was that it was first explained by Greek philosophers, and the word diabetes mellitus is derived from 2 words, that is sweet urine. So basically, the taste of the urine is sweet, that is why they named it diabetes mellitus. So it is basically fountain of sweet urine because the patient urinates too much. This diuresis, and then there is the sweet urine, sweet taste or sweet smelling urine. That's why they name it this. If you wanted to go into more details, you could write that diabetes was actually referred in literature by Ayurvedic physicians, Islamic physicians in 15th century, or by the Greeks, by the Egyptians in 1st century BC, and by the Chinese physicians. But the main point that you needed to write in history, if you had knowledge about it, or if you search it on the internet, is that the first formal discovery of diabetes mellitus was in 1889 by 2 scientists, Joseph and Oscar, and they noted the role of pancreas in the production of this disease, in this ailment. Prior to that, there was just guesses. The doctors, they guessed that it was a problem with kidneys, that is why they are secreting too much sweet compounds, that is carbohydrates, into the urine, etc. So this was formally described uh, in 1889 as a problem of the pancreas. And then in 1893, before the discovery of the diabetes, there was a scientist that was named as Paul Langerhans. Paul Langerhans, actually in 1869, he described that there are some clumps of cells in the pancreas that produce special kind of enzymes. So the islet of Langerhans are named after that scientist, Paul Langerhans, and the association of these beta Langerhans cells with the diabetes was described in 1893 by another scientist. So you need to keep it concise when you write an answer. So if you just wrote about diabetes mellitus, what is the meaning of diabetes mellitus, and it was discovered like in 1st century before Christ BC, by the Greeks, and then Egyptians, then Muslims, the Ayurveds, the Chinese, it would have been enough. But if you wrote some more detail, then it needed to be concise. I didn't want the precise details, but at least you know why the cells due to which this disease is produced are known as islet of Langerhans. There is a meaning to that Langerhans part because those cells were discovered by a scientist that was Paul Langerhans. So things like that. So the basic um, for your knowledge, I'm telling you this for your knowledge, the basic involvement of diabetes in so much diseases and the basic role of diabetes in causing multiple organ failure and so much ailments was discovered in the 20th century by different scientists. And then in 1920s, around 1920s ish, we discovered the role of insulin in diabetes and then started prescribing insulin that was derived from uh, uh, pig serum to the patients for the treatment. Nowadays, the insulin is not produced, not actually extracted from the pigs, but it is derived from different bacteria in which we transmit the genes via plasmids and then they produce insulin and then we use those recombinant bacteria to produce that insulin and then that insulin is delivered to us in vials. So that was the basic concept behind the history of diabetes. Then there was the second question that was about the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Now, if you want to tabulate the differences, that is the best way for you. So, if you've studied about type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, you just need to make three columns. One is the main topic, then type 1 and then type 2 diabetes. For example, age of onset. Type 1 diabetes is more common in children and teenagers, and type 2's age of onset is in adults beyond the age of 40s. Now we say that it is in more 30 years of age. Then the BMI or the body structure. BMI is basically body mass index that is derived from the height of the person and the weight of the person. So the patients with more BMI, that is the obese patients, the fat patients, they are more commonly seen in type 2 diabetes, whereas type 1 diabetes patients is thin and lean and have a normal build, could have a normal build, but it is usually thin lean patient. Then mechanism. The type 1 diabetes is caused due to the failure of beta cells of islet of Langerhans to produce insulin, and type 2 diabetes is mostly due to insensitivity of receptors to that insulin. Then there could be serum insulin level. It is decreased to none in type 1 diabetes, and in type 2 diabetes it may be normal or increased. Then you can say uh, the treatment. How would we treat these two ailments? So in type 1 diabetes the treatment is only insulin, whereas in type 2 diabetes we can give hypoglycemic drugs as well as insulin. Then there would be a column for complications of both these diseases. So type 1 diabetes, diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma are present. Hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma is not so common, but in type 2 diabetes there is only hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. Then the presence of ketone bodies, that is more common in type 1 diabetes, not so common in type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes patients do not have ketone bodies. So another thing could be the presence of C peptide. C peptide is not seen in type 1 diabetes. It can be seen in type 2 diabetes. Its level is normal. These were the things that you could have discussed, that you could have described in a tabulated form, in a table in 3 columns, and these things. So those of you who gave the answers in tabulated form, that's very good, and those of you who explained these things in detail in uh, paragraphs, that is all right, no problem. But remember this: when I am checking papers or any other teacher is checking papers, the person who has answered the questions right to the point, like in a table form or in bullets form, that would be easier for me to check. And if I see 6 or 7 differences between these things, 5 or more than 5 are expected, I would be compelled to give him or her the full marks, because I know that this person, this student, has complete grip, complete knowledge of this subject, and he's just not talking in the air. He is giving a concrete answer to my question. The last question was the differences between diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. So the differences between these can be tabulated like this. Uh, the mechanism in diabetes is problem with insulin, either deficiency of insulin or insensitivity to insulin. Whereas in diabetes insipidus, it is the problem with ADH, antidiuretic hormone. There is deficiency of antidiuretic hormone, or there is resistance to antidiuretic hormone. Then there could be types. Diabetes mellitus has type 1 and type 2, and diabetes insipidus is of 2 types, that is nephrogenic or central. Then there could be differences between let's say uh, the location of the problem, type or gland involved in the problem. Diabetes mellitus is due to pancreas, and diabetes insipidus is due to hypothalamus or pituitary or kidneys. Then you can say using glucose level, it is increased in diabetes mellitus, whereas it is decreased in diabetes insipidus. Then there could be electrolyte imbalance, uncommon in diabetes mellitus, more common in diabetes insipidus. Uh, then the treatment for this condition: hypoglycemics or insulin for the diabetes mellitus, and vasopressin or ADH for diabetes insipidus. Now, these things, I do not expect you to write down all of these things, but you should know at least the etiology, the problem due to which these diseases are caused, the mechanisms due to which these diseases are present, or the gland that is involved in these diseases, urine concentration of different things in these things you should remember, these things you should know. The treatment part and the diagnosis part, that would come in final year in the medicine section, general medicine. So I don't expect you to remember that, but if you know about that, that is very very good, because it would help you when you are a senior in medical college. So always keep your interest in these kind of things. These diseases are kind of common, so you should know about these diseases. Okay, so I appreciate all of you who have submitted the answers. You're doing an effort, and I appreciate that. Now let's start skeletal system. So skeletal system, this is basically a review of all the things that we've studied already. For the new students, and to revise the older students, because in the start we were not so aware of the medical terminology, we were not aware of how we are going to study or proceed. So now we're going to review that. Now, uh, today a student, he asked a question that was very nice of him. He asked about the types of joints and the uh, detail of musculoskeletal system. Why aren't we studying that? So one reason behind that is these things you'll understand when we go to dissection hall, when these lectures are taking place, and on the same time, in the same time period, we are going to dissection hall and looking at those muscles, those joints, while studying the regional anatomy. That is the thing from where you'll pick many things, and you'll be able to understand it more thoroughly. So I'm hoping that when we return to China, I would be able to take you to the dissection hall and able to show you all of the structures that we've studied about. That way, it would be easier for you to understand and it would be easier for me to teach. So, we'll try that inshallah when we go back. Right now, we're going to have an overview of the system. So, let's talk about the skeletal system. Skeletal system is composed of the body's bones and associated ligaments, tendons, and cartilages. So, when we talk about the skeletal system, it is not just about the skeleton. This thing that you see here, these are only the bones that make up the human skeleton. But the skeletal system or musculoskeletal system includes these bones as well as the ligaments which are attached with these bones of the muscles. Ligaments are present at the end of the muscles, or muscular tendons that would help in keeping the structure in its place, that would help in movement of different joints, different bones, as well as the cartilages which are involved in forming the joints, as well as the cartilages which are present in other areas such as nose or ears, in ribs. So all of these things are important in musculoskeletal system. Now if we talk about the skeletal system, it is composed of the following structures. First, the bone. So what is the bone? But bone is a hard whitish colored structure that you see in the body. This is the first thing that you will observe when you start anatomy in a medical college. This was one of the first topics that we started after a brief introduction to anatomy, because we at least should know about the bones of our body, their positions, their names, etc. So bones are in fact highly specialized hard form of connective tissue that makes up most of the skeleton in our body. Apart from bones, there is cartilage, there are ligaments that would keep them in place. So bones are the bricks, building blocks of the skeletal system. Then there is the cartilage. Cartilage is just resilient. What is resilient? Resilient is something which is hard to break, something which can handle the pressure, something which can handle the stress. So it is a very resilient structure which is semi-rigid form of connective tissue. It is not as much hard as the bone, but it is hard to some extent. And this tissue forms parts of the skeleton where more flexibility or movement is required. So cartilage is present in between the joints, cartilage is present on many organs. It is a part of our skeletal system where we need some space, where we need some flexibility, such as in the ribs, in the thoracic cage, we need to breathe, right? So we need the cartilage for that. So it is present there. Then comes the tendons. Tendons are the fibrous, non-contractile and cord-like parts of a muscle. We'll read about tendons, we'll see the difference between the tendons and the ligaments as we go further down the slide. And in the end, there are the ligaments, that is the fibrous bands which would connect the adjacent bones with each other. So these are the main components of the skeletal system apart from the muscle. When we say musculoskeletal system, will include the muscles as well. So let's talk about some functions of the skeletal system. Why is it so important for the body? So what do you think, what would happen if we don't have a skeleton? So if we don't have this kind of support, if we don't have these kind of rigid structures in our body, what would happen? So have you ever seen meat? Meat is muscle mass, normal muscle mass. So you've seen the rigidity in it, right? So if we take out the skeleton of a person and we try to set up that meat to move forward, backward, do its function, what would happen? It would just settle down like a jelly. So we are nothing without the skeleton. It provides us with the required support by which we are able to resist gravity, we are able to stand on our feet, we are able to move. If we don't have the skeletal system, we'll just fall down like our clothes or like jelly. So there are some amoeba who don't have skeleton. They do have skeleton in the form of cytoskeleton, small fibers, but they move by podocytes, small foot-like projections. So if we won't have skeleton, we would have to be attached to the earth and move like that. That is very difficult for survival. So being a highly complex individual, human body is very complex. The skeletal system is a part of the support system. How does it provide support? It provides support to the bones of the legs, to the pelvic girdle, through the pelvic girdle and the vertebral column, which support all of the weight of our erect body when we stand straight. All of the weight of the body, of the organs, of the musculature, everything that is supported upon our vertebral column, that is this backbone, then the pelvic girdles, the hip bones, and then the bones of the leg. So these would handle all of our weight, would keep us intact, would keep us erect even under the effect of gravity. Then there is the mandible bone or jawbone that supports the teeth. Teeth are attached with the mandible that help us in chewing our food, in ingesting material so that we can produce energy from it. So it is very important there. Then there are other bony supports that support various organs and the tissues, such as during or inspiration and expiration. When we take in air, we respire, or we expirate the air, inspire or expirate the air. The ribs, they play a very important role in expanding, in contracting the thoracic cavity. Moreover, the bones, they have a second very important function, that is the protection of internal organs. Now bones are hard structures. They are able to withstand stress, they are able to withstand fall, they are able to withstand different uh, things. So what do you think, what would happen if we remove the skull of a person? Even small movements, forward and backward movements, that would disrupt the function of the brain. The brain would be free to move around. The connection between the spinal cord and the brain, that is around the medulla oblongata, that could snap at any moment. So this cranium or cranial cavity or the skull, it keeps the brain in its place. It keeps the brain protected from the outside factors. That is, if we fall down, if we get hit on the head during an accident, it would protect the internal structure. But it could do that, it could do the cushioning to a degree, to an extent. After that, the brain damage could occur. So, bones of the skull protect the brain from the outside factors, outside stresses, phenomena. Then there are ribs in the sternum. Sternum is the breastbone that is present here. On the anterior side, starting from the these clavicles up until the last rib. These structures protect the vital organs that are the heart and the lungs. They keep them protected. They help in respiration of air. So they serve a very important function. Then there are the vertebrae that make up this backbone. The backbone has a structure inside that is known as the spinal cord. Spinal cord is a bunch of nerve fibers that are going from the brain towards the peripheral tissue. It is a part of the central nervous system, very sensitive to any kind of damage, and it cannot repair itself. So if we do not have spinal cord, if we do not have vertebra to protect the spinal cord, a simple blow to the back would kill the person. So if you've seen a patient of sciatica or vertebral disc compression or vertebral dislocation, disc slip, what happens in that person? That person can be paralyzed from the position where that vertebra is damaged downwards. All of the body that is paralyzed from that position if the thing is severe, if the damage is severe. So they serve a very important purpose, that is to keep our body erect, and moreover vertebra protect the internal spinal cord. हराम मगज जिसे कहते हैं उर्दू में. The other functions include the movement. Skeletal system has specific structures which are known as skeletal muscles, which are made up of ligaments. These muscles use the bones as levers to move the body forward or backward or into different positions. So if we try to reach a cup, lift a cup, all of that is due to the correct working of the brain, the spinal cord, the peripheral nerves, the muscles and the bone. So we should be thankful actually to Allah, to God, that He made us this way, and everything in our body is in perfect working condition and is coordinating with each and every cell and structure so that we can perform this function. So movement is a big part, big function of the skeletal system. Moreover, the skeletal system is reservoir for minerals and adipose tissue. So bones are contain 99% of calcium of our body. So only 1% is intracellular or in the extracellular fluid. 99% of body's calcium is stored in the bones, and whenever there is deficiency of calcium, we can use the calcium from the bone stores. So do you know a minute change in the calcium concentration in the extracellular fluid could kill a person. It could induce arrhythmias of the heart, that is, disturbed rhythm, lub-dub sound of the heart, as we've studied in the cardiovascular chapter. So, that is maintained by the parathyroid hormone, calcitonin. There are so many processes that try to maintain that calcium at its optimal level. So, bones serve as a reservoir for the calcium. Moreover, 85% of the body's phosphorus is stored in the bones. And adipose tissue, that is the fat, is found in the marrow of certain long bones. Humerus, femur, radius ulna, tibia fibula, they contain storage form of fat that can be used to produce energy, that is used to provide cushioning to the internal structures of the bone. So that is also very important. Basically, bones are made up of a molecule that is known as calcium hydroxyapatite. So that contains phosphate, that contains calcium, oxygen, all kind of things. Moreover, bones are very important in hematopoiesis. That is the formation of blood cells. What happens is there are hematopoietic stem cells that are present in the bone marrow. From these hematopoietic stem cells, the blood is produced. So bones are in fact the precursors for the production of the blood. So these are very important structures, serve many purposes, serve many important functions, essential functions for the survival of an organism. And that is why we need to study them thoroughly in detail, and we need to do the dissection so that we can understand each and every important aspect of the musculoskeletal system, of the bones, of the cartilages, of the muscles, etc. So this was all for this lecture. We'll study more detail in the next lecture, inshallah. And I hope these lectures are not bothering you or irritating you, because we've studied these things already. But now we are going into more details, more functions. We are elaborating more on these things. So please correlate these things with your VD or any book that you're using. And if you have any questions, please get back to me on what WeChat. I'll answer your queries, inshallah. And if you answered your assignment right, that is very good. And if some answers were deficient, I'll hope that next time you'll keep my suggestions in view and post the answers like that. So thank you, take care, Allah Hafiz.